Hey everyone, Roger here with the Early Valiant Barracuda Club. Now we've been kicking along here on Project Barracuda, and one of the things we've wanted to do on this car is we wanted to remove these old torsion bar style hood springs. They're kind of a pain in the butt to deal with, and to me they just don't look nice, you know, running across the engine bay like they do. So we're going to remove them and we're going to replace them with a set of springs that come from a later Model A body. All right, these came from a, I want to say a 73 to 76 Dart, Duster, Demon, one of those cars, and they're going to fit quite nicely. We're going to do a little work to these, so follow along, would you? So to get things started, we need to remove the pin that holds the hinge to the spring pivot point. And we're going to clamp that flat pin side into our vise. I'm going to use a torch, heat up that side of the pin, and I'm going to let it get nice and soft, and I'm going to pull the hinge right off of that pin. Now we want to save that pin. We're going to reuse it on our car a little further on. But, I mean, you could simply grind the back of this pin off if you wanted to. It's not a big deal because we're only going to weld it back to the hinge on our car anyway. The pin has a shoulder that goes into the spring we want to save. That's where it pivots. We want it tight to our hinge. So you can do what I'm doing here with a torch, heat it up and, you know, pull it right off, or you can grind it off. Either way it's going to work. We just want to save that pin because it's nice and flat and thin on the inside, and it fits nicely up against our cowl. Alright, I've already gone ahead and drilled a hole for the upper part of the spring on the existing 66 hinge here. And basically what I did was straight at the bottom, right in the center of that arc here, is where I drew a line straight down, dead center of the hinge, drilled a hole the same size as the pin. That way it'll fit right in on its original shoulder. And we'll peen that over. And if we have to weld it to this part, that's fine, because this is the part here that rides on the spring part. This part doesn't need to move at all, so it'll get either, you know, heated up and peened over, or we'll just weld it right to that hinge part there. All right, we've got our initial mock-up going on here, and what you're seeing is we got the hole drilled out, like we said, in the lower part of the hinge, and we have the spring kind of hanging out in here with the original pin there through the hole we drilled, and it's just hanging down here loose. Now we want a little gap here in the hinge to the underside of the cowl, so to do that I'm using a 3/8 inch drill bit, and I got a bungee cord kind of holding it up in place, so I'm using like an extra pair of hands like that. Now I went ahead and picked up some 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch channel, and I've cut off 3 inches of that to make our lower mount for the hinge, or the spring pivot. Now I've marked it straight up the middle, dead center, as you can see right through here, this mark here, and it's just being held in place by a magnet, so I can kind of mock up where everything's going to go. So it's generally in position right now. So now what I'm going to do is we need to figure out where we're going to put this hole for the mount. So I'm going to take this out and put the pin back in, because one thing we want to make sure is that the lower pivot bolt for the spring sits behind the top pivot when it's open. So you can see it's kind of a little plumb bob I made there, and with that marked here, so I put a little mark there already, we're going to measure back about 1 inch, drill a hole, and we're going to put our bolt there for that. Now the other thing we're going to do while we have this out is we have the contours for the body panels here, this round cutout, and this, you know, the hinge brace for the door overlaps here. We're going to have to grind it down on the edges here, so this will fit flush. So we'll get that done, come right back. We've taken our lower mount piece and we've gone and ground down what we needed to grind so it'll fit up against the body. And before we go and do another mock-up, I want to show you the bolts that we're going to use to make the pivot for the lower part of the spring. Now they're 1/2 inch bolts with shoulders on them, but I want you to be careful about something. I bought 2 bolts at the local big box store, and they're both shoulder bolts, both brand new in the packaging, but the shoulder on this one is about 5/8. The shoulder on this one is a 1/2 inch. That's going to be too short of a shoulder, because once you put on your washer and you put it through your spring, you put your other washer on there, and then you put it through the bracket that you're going to weld to the body. We're also going to take a nut, we're going to put it on the back here, we're going to actually weld this to the back side of this channel bracket. That way it's permanently mounted, and we'll trim our bolt to fit. That shoulder is going to go ahead and tighten up against that bolt on the inside there and give us a nice pivot here. If I can get this in straight, there we go. It's going to pivot nicely for us. But this one's going to be a little too short, and it's going to pinch off, and it's going to make this tight. It's going to pinch that right up against there. We don't want that. So I'm going to either go get another bolt that's got a slightly longer shoulder, or I'll take one I already have. It's got a long shoulder on it, and I'll just take my 1/2 inch die and cut it down as necessary. But when all's said and done, we'll put on a little bit of blue Loctite to the bolt. We put it into the nut, and it'll hold it in nice and tight. This will tighten up, but leave just enough gap on that so it'll pivot when we get it welded into the car. Okay, we've got everything kind of ready for our final mock-up. Got the top pin in place. I'm using these vice grips to make sure it's pushed all the way in. We've got our bolt shortened. We've got the nut welded to the back side of this channel. Got our washers in place. And I'm going to hold this in place right where I want it. I'm going to give it a couple tack welds. And we'll remove this, and I'll finish welding this. Get it all set to go. Okay, what we have here is completely welded in lower support for the spring. I've gone ahead and actually welded that upper pin to the hinge. I thought I could heat it up and peen it over, but it was just too hard to support this, so I just went ahead and welded that up. Now it's got to get ground a little bit, but it's secure. Now I didn't go ahead and put the hood on to show you guys how this worked, because I'm just one person and it takes at least two to get it on. Plus, with the hinges in place, you're going to want to have two people holding up. Or actually, what you're going to want to do is take this bolt out, put the hood down with the hinges down, bolt it to your hood, and then lift it up and prop it in. But I got a bar here. I'm going to show you how it looks when it comes down. So that would simulate the hood being all the way down. And you can see this doesn't stick out very far. It doesn't come very far forward, pivots nicely. Where we have the hole punched here for the new pin, in this part it does not hit the body here. And even if it did, let's say you got your hole off a little bit, you could always come in here and grind this off if you needed to. And then you let go. I'm just going to let a little pressure off on this bar, and it just kind of comes right up on its own. Beautiful. Well, there you have it, folks. That's how you take one of these, I want to say, second generation A-body hood springs, remove it from the factory hinge, and modify your early A-body to accept using one of these new springs. That way you can remove the cross torsion bars springs from your car. Now, a couple things we're going to do in the future once we get the engine compartment out. You know, there's that support bracket right in the middle of the firewall. We're going to remove that. And the other thing I may end up doing too is these are the cowling supports, the struts on the sides. I haven't put those back on yet. So what I may end up doing is cutting this out to remove this support divot for the torsion bar spring and this other hole where the one comes through. I'll maybe heat that up, flatten it out, weld that hole shut, kind of give this whole side piece a nice clean look. Then I'll weld that back in on the side for my cowl support. I have seen where there's people online who have used the gas strut supports to hold their hoods up. I've not gone that route. You certainly can if you'd like to. And it would be along the same lines. You'd put your hole right about in the same spot as we did for the second gen springs. And you'd want to make some kind of lower mount down the area of the side kick panel. It all depends on what size gas strut you purchase, how long it is, as to where you put those. So let's really you know, fab up your own as you go. Well, that's pretty much it for this particular project on Project Barracuda. Again, I want to thank you for watching. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and see you next time.